Great, so in this video, we're going to talk about franchising from a franchisee's perspective. Okay? Now, again, opening a franchise, your own franchise location as a franchisee, is just as serious as a business decision as any other kind that you can make with a small business, right? It's no less serious. What I always tell people is work in the franchise that you wish to open first and get a feel for it. Right? Actually go in, because you're fundamentally going into a lifestyle like any other form of entrepreneurship. You need to know very clearly what to expect. So start out with that. Figure out what the, plagues and pleasures are of your particular franchise of choice. Also, remember, you need to check if there's any litigation in the past fiscal year against the franchisor. That's a huge deal, and they are required to file that. Okay? And in some states, they're required to disclose it. So make sure you know what those lawsuits are. Okay? It's something you can protect you from making some sort of a fatal mistake. The thing that you got to remember is being a franchisee can be tough for a lot of new entrepreneurs, right? Because you've got to remember, you have to be willing to take orders from someone. You're in that nebulous realm between entrepreneur and manager. And that has advantages, of course, being a manager and an entrepreneur, but also has disadvantages, right? You have to accept that, unlike being a regular entrepreneur, it's not all about you. In fact, it's not even all about your location. It's about providing maximal benefit to the franchise system of which you just happen to be a part. So when the system benefits, in theory, you benefit too. So you've got to be willing to make sacrifices to the system. You also have to remember that you can make suggestions to your franchisor, and those suggestions can be rejected. And you have to figure out how you're going to accept the fact that your suggestions may not always be taken. You can't do whatever you want because you're not a traditional entrepreneur. And of course, again, you have got to remember that you need to do a little introspection. How hard are you willing to work? When I was a kid, guy down the street from his dad owned Burger King franchises. And I said, whoa, that's so cool. You can eat Big Macs all the time. I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I don't remember how old I was. And the guy said, it's not that cool. What it means that I own Burger Kings is I have to learn how to unclog a toilet with a bent coat hanger because my employees won't do that. And of course, if you're an adult, never mention anything involving toilets to like 6, 7, 8-year-old little boys, because they're going to find that tremendously funny and even cooler than it was before. And that's probably why I remember that particular story of my buddy's dad over everything else he's ever told me, right? But the point is, you've got to be willing to make some sacrifices, some very serious sacrifices, and do things that may be unpleasant or disagreeable to you. The other thing you got to remember, you've got to be willing to put a substantial amount of capital at risk. So it can be very expensive to open franchises. Like for KFC's can be, 7 figures to open one. Other franchises are, 4 or 5 figures to open. But you've got to remember, you're going to have to pay royalties to that franchise owner no matter what. In fact, your business may be operating at a loss, but you still got to pay those royalties. And that can be very frustrating, that you're not paying off of your net profit, you're paying off your gross earnings. It's difficult, and let's talk about those costs of a franchise kind of while we're at it. First of all, you've got to pay your initial franchise fee. I just mentioned that for KFC that can be in 7 figures. Other franchises it can be in 5 or 6 figures, right? Every single one of them is different. Again, looking at the franchise disclosure document, you can figure some of those things out. There's also capital requirements, and that's going to be different for every franchise. You may need to buy real estate in certain locations. You may have to put up your own building. Some franchises actually have buildings and locations set up for you that you pay a rental fee on, others don't. Startup inventory could be quite expensive. Again, think about opening a car dealership. That's going to be huge inventory costs, right? Whereas maybe starting an accountancy firm might have lower startup costs because the main product is a service, not some sort of a piece of equipment. And of course, you may have to pay for a business license, getting that first business license started. And of course, you're going to have a royalty payment. On average, these tend to be about 5% of gross monthly income, but it can be more or less than that. So these are very expensive and substantial costs that you need to consider. Of course, there's other fees too, right? You may have to pay into a national or regional advertising fund. And that also goes along with the specials. So, I like Pizza Hut generally. And they used to have this special at Pizza Hut, and I'll talk about this in the article on Yum Brands and a couple playlists. But you know, Pizza Hut for a while had this special. It was like one large pizza, unlimited toppings, and it was like $14.99 or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but anyhow, that's not important for the example. It was a great special for me, the customer, because I could just load that pizza up with everything I wanted. The franchise owners hated it because there was no way they could make a profit, right? So these companies may have their little specials, and they're special for the franchise, the system, but they're not special for you, okay? So you've got to remember that's an extra cost associated with advertising as well. There's other fees. You may have to train additional staff, but you have to use their doctrine, and so you pay to get new staff trained because you're doing it their way. They may send franchise consultants to help you get started or help you overcome any problems. Franchise consultants are not free. If you need getting your IT support set up, you may have to pay for that too. And chances are you're going to have to use their IT support, not your other one. And of course, providing a host of other items and services, again, and it has to be done the franchisor's way. So let's talk really quickly about the advantages and disadvantages of the franchise from a franchisee's perspective. An advantage is, again, you are getting a product or service that is at least somewhat well known within a given market. That's a great thing, okay? You don't have to convince people of the value of the product to the same extent as you would if you were doing a true new startup. Again, there's an established trademark with it or business system, right? Do you need to learn all the IT and inventory and supply chain management stuff? Well, no, because you're going to do it the franchisor's way anyhow, so that part you don't really have to learn. That's a good thing. You're going to get their technical expertise. They're going to be able to tell you a lot of the stuff of how to run a business, which is a good stepping stone into entrepreneurship. You know, you don't have to worry about marketing. They're going to do the marketing for you. That can be, you know, great because not everybody's a marketing expert. Some franchise systems also have financing available, okay? And it can be at preferential interest rates. That's a good thing. And of course, you have the opportunity to grow, in theory, at a rate slightly faster than a traditional entrepreneurship because you don't really have to do all the same bells and whistles that you would if you were starting a business from scratch, in theory. Of course, there's disadvantages. We've talked about the costs. These costs can crush you. You want to be creative? Not in a franchise. The duration, the nature of these commitments. You may have to sign a 5-year agreement with your particular franchise, and let's say, you know what, you can't make it financially viable at the end of year 2. Tough luck. You've either got to stay in the franchise for another 3 years or you've got to pay some sort of a contract to get out. In fact, you may not even have the right to sell that franchise to anyone you want. That's awful. There's also all sorts of issues with fraud, misunderstanding, and lack of franchisor commitment. This is something that happens. Again, that's why you've got to check to see if there's any litigation against your franchisor. There's also, if other franchisees in a system don't perform well, that's a bad reflection on you. So let's say you open a McDonald's, your McDonald's is clean, whatever, and the McDonald's across town keeps getting people sick from food poisoning. I'm not saying McDonald's does, I'm just giving a hypothetical example. But let's say that happens. That looks bad on you. And in fact, we're going to talk about that in one of our article discussions on Jack in the Box, right? The Jack in the Box, a couple franchisees weren't exactly doing the right thing, and that made the whole system look bad, okay? And of course, like any other business, there's a huge potential for failure. So if you think that you want to start a franchise or become a franchisee, first thing you want to do, visit several of the franchisors' outlets. Talk to people. In fact, work in them. That's even better. Meet with your franchise attorney, an attorney representing you. Yes, the franchisor will have their own attorney, but that attorney represents the franchisor's interests, not your interest. You need your own attorney. You need to meet with the franchisor in person, talk to them a little bit, check their references, review all of the franchisor's documents with your attorney. You need to make sure you sign the franchise agreement, go to as much of the training as you possibly can, and then of course, then you go ahead and you start opening that franchise. Well, great. I hope you enjoyed this video. Our next video, we're going to talk about some common mistakes in franchising, and then I will conclude very briefly with international franchising. Great. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.